Good afternoon, knife nerds. Today we are taking a look at the Arcform Catalyst, which is now a discontinued model as of 2021. And this is a model produced by We Knives and designed by Geoff Blauvelt of Tough Knives, I believe was the company name. And of course, also collaborated with Arcform, so we've got three different names involved in the manufacturing of this knife. I think these released around 2018, which makes them about 3 years old, which is a pretty good run for a production knife. I hate to see this go off of the market, but it is what it is. You know, it's time to move on to something new, I would imagine, for Arcform and Tough Knives. And hopefully they're coming with some new designs pretty soon. They've always done the slim foot. They've done that with both Riot and Protec, and so they've had some interesting designs over the years, but they don't bring a new design very often. I do hope they're coming with something new in the not so distant future, as we're seeing the Catalyst, and probably I would imagine that the slim foot is going off the market as well, but don't quote me on that. Anyways, on to the knife. This is a 8.25 inch overall length frame lock flipper with a 3.5 inch blade and a blade steel of CPM S35 VN and a handle length 4.75 inches and an overall weight of 5.29 ounces. So it is a bit of a chunk. This is really pretty beefy blade stock here. Despite the weight relief pockets in the handles, this thing weighs a good 5.29 ounces, which is, you know, pretty solid piece of titanium in your pocket for a 3.5 inch blade. But it actually pockets pretty well, thanks to this pretty long, nice pocket clip here. It's not even remotely a deep carry clip. You're going to have nearly about an inch of knife sticking out of your pocket there. But this clip, I really like this clip. It's pretty nice. It slides in and out of pocket easy and retains the knife very well. We have an S35 VN blade here, which is a drop point design with a swedge up top and a flat ground bevel. Stone washed on the bevels and hand rubbed satin flats with that very attractive Arcform logo there on that side and the Tough Knives logo on the back side there. This blade took a beautiful edge. I did match the factory angle, which I believe was exactly 20 degrees or 19 degrees. It's a thick blade, and you have this really wide flat portion of the blade here, so they don't get the grind very thin, you know, up here in the bevel, but it does come to a reasonably thin behind the edge here. So it's a pretty decent cutter. I'm not going to say it's a great slicer, but it cuts well for your average daily EDC tasks. And this would be my fourth Arcform Catalyst. That's right, I bought this knife 4 freaking times. Why? Because every time I see one for sale on the aftermarket at a good price, I just can't help myself. This design language, this profile of this knife is, to me, it's beautiful. I just absolutely love the shape of the blade, the shape of the handle, and the overall profile that this knife gives you. It's a pretty attractive design to me. It does have a plain stone wash on the titanium, and we're looking at green micarta here, which is a pretty smoothly polished micarta. Doesn't have a whole lot of traction to it, but it looks pretty good, and it holds on to the oils. A lot of these micartas that are kind of rougher textured, that add all that grip, The grip is nice, but the finger oils will dry up in a pretty quick amount of time, and then you've got a blotchy looking kind of finish on the micarta. And I'm not the biggest micarta guy, admittedly. I like it on some knives, but I'm just not a big micarta guy. I don't go out chasing micarta slip joints and things like that like a lot of people do just to get the micarta. But that being said, I have owned 2 of the plain carbon fiber and 1 of the Arcform Catalyst, which was the all black Catalyst. And I have sold the previous 3 Arcform Catalysts that I owned, and I just happened to come across this. I was surfing the Reddit knife swap last week, and saw a guy put this up on there for a pretty reasonable price, and I grabbed yet another Arcform Catalyst. And it's been probably a year since I owned my last one, but I wanted another one, and here it is. And now that they are discontinued, I'm glad I was able to pick this up, and I'm probably going to try and hang on to this one for a while and actually not sell it or trade it, because you won't be able to get these anymore. And it's been produced for 3 years. There's a lot of them out there on the aftermarket. You'll still be able to find them occasionally for sale in the knife trade groups and stuff, but yeah, it's discontinued, man. It's off the market. So if you see one out there and it's a design that you like, I highly recommend going ahead and dropping the bucks on that and just pick it up, because I have a lot of nice things to say about this knife. There are a few cons to it, but overall, a very positive review is what you're going to get today on the Arcform Catalyst. The first thing I will say is that the action on this knife is pretty exceptional after some adjustment. All 4 of them that I have owned required me to adjust the lock bar to get them to a point that I like. All 4 of them. It was very consistent across the board that the lock bar was just really, really stiff and dialed in to give it a really heavy detent. And some people might like that, but that's not my jam. I like a drop shut action, and I like a medium detent. Medium to hard, but not excessively hard, which is what the Arcform Catalyst typically comes with. In my personal experience with the 4 that I have owned, they all came with a really, really stiff lock bar. And so what I did was adjusted the lock bar and removed some of that tension off of the lock bar. Now, that's a pretty good trick on this knife, because We Knives manufacturing is really, really pretty tight tolerances, and they don't necessarily give you a whole lot of play to work with in that lockup. So in other words, it's already locked up pretty early, and if you start to relieve tension on the lock bar by adjusting it, you might get it to a point to where you start to get a little bit of blade play, right? And I'm holding it out right now. But you'll get to that point where you start to get a little bit of up, down, and lock rock there if you adjust the lock bar too far. It's a very, very sensitive lock bar to adjust, and that was my experience with all 4 of the versions that I had. But I am and was able to get it to a point where the blade becomes drop shutty. I still have full lockup, no lock play, and a very snappy, very, very snappy action. So there is a perfect point in there where you can tune this to be exactly what you want it to be, but it's very sensitive and it's very difficult to hit that point. I think I adjusted this one 3 times before I got it where I wanted it. So, and I have quite a bit of experience adjusting lock bars. I almost always adjust frame lock flippers to my preference. And this one is just one of those ones where the tolerances are so tight, it's extremely sensitive. And yeah, but the action is pretty darn good after the adjustment. So One thing about the action on the Catalyst, the flipper tab is canted forward up here, and it's forward. It's almost in front of the pivot. So you have that momentum when you get that thing moving. You have that extra centrifugal force because the pivot is, the flipper tab is forward of the pivot. So it gives you a really strong, solid flip with a good thwack on lockup. And yeah, boom, very nice action, very smooth and drop shutty. I did install skiff bearings as per my usual routine. I'm gonna go ahead and roll in a few images right here showing you what the knife looks like taken apart, how the milling pockets look, and how the bearings look, and all of that. And it was replaced with the 5mm 11 ball skiff bearings, which is pretty standard for most WE knives. They typically will take those 5mm bearings on most of their models. Now, one negative thing I will say about the knife, starting with something positive, I think this side of the knife looks freaking amazing. This plain stone wash with this stone washed and satin flat, blade with the two-tone blade like that, this side of the knife looks freaking phenomenal. And I honestly could have lived without this shadow boxed faux bolster and this micarta onlay. I could have lived completely without all of that extra design work and machining. If this was just a plain stone washed contoured titanium that looked exactly like the backside, the lock side of the knife, I think this knife would have been an even better seller. I think it would have looked better, and I think it would have been a better user knife. So they did this extra machine work here that gives you this faux shadow boxed bolster and this micarta onlay, which is a lot of extra machine work to achieve something that's it's not ugly, but it's not particularly fancy. And I think they just felt like they didn't really want to do a super plain Jane titanium frame lock flipper, but in turn, I think they actually sacrificed some of the usability of this knife, or EDC ability of this knife, in order to incorporate this extra kind of fancy machine work here that really wasn't necessary. It would have looked better as a plain Jane stone washed flipper on both sides. And also, it just looks weird when you look at it from this position and you see how they did this shadow boxing here, and this scale is just normal, one piece, nice contoured piece of titanium, and then you have this weird shadow box effect. It actually makes the show side scale look way thicker than it actually is. I do believe it's the same thickness as the lock side scale. I haven't actually measured it, but I think it's the same thickness, but it appears to look thicker to me because of that strange shadow boxing feature. I'm just not a fan of that, and I wish to God they had just done a plain titanium show side here, or maybe they could have put it plain and just done like an inlay rather than this faux bolster thing going on here. So it's an odd design choice for me, but it's, it doesn't make me love the knife less, because I do love this knife. And yeah, the other negative thing I was gonna say is, of course, about the width of the flats. They could have brought this grind up, a full 1/4 inch higher and gotten a much thinner grind on the bevel and made this a better slicer. It's a thick chunk of a blade, and this knife feels weighty, and I feel like most of that weight is the blade and the how wide this flat portion is here, and how thick it is throughout that entire flat portion of the blade. If that flat had been thinner and the bevel had been ground higher, I feel like they could have shaved off probably close to another, half ounce to 3/4 of an ounce easily just off of the blade there. And you've got the milling pockets in here, but it's still pretty weighty, for the size of the knife. But it also feels extremely robust due to that weight. I mean, this thing is a tank, and you know it when you got this in your hand. You know that this is a rock solid freaking knife, and it's just a tank. It's a beast of a 3.5-inch frame lock flipper. That being said, we also have a kind of a plain Jane titanium backspacer here, so that's more weight. They didn't really do any jimping or anything special there, and there's just a drilled through lanyard hole there. Maybe some gear style backspacing there, grinds and machining on that backspacer there might have been a good choice. There is no jimping on the blade, so there's no extra traction here. And yeah, man, it's a phenomenal knife with a few things that could have just been done a little bit better had they been thought about a little more, I think. But of course, like most knife manufacturers and designers, they're on to the next big thing, which for Geoff over there, I believe, was the CKF Switch, which is a very similar looking knife to the Catalyst. It's just a little bit skinnier throughout here, and of course manufactured by CKF in collaboration with CKF and CKF's Chinese manufacturer, whoever they are. We've never known the truth about that, but whoever makes CKF's knives produced the CKF Switch, which was the Geoff Blauvelt design, Tough Knives design. And I really have always liked the appearance of the CKF Switch, and I've always wanted one, but they command a pretty hefty price on the aftermarket. I typically see them going for $500 and above. This knife originally retailed for $265 with its S35 VN blade steel, and I feel like that's a very reasonable retail price for a knife of this caliber. The machine work here is pretty nice and precision, and I feel like We Knives really kind of did an exceptionally good job with this particular collaboration that they did here, and to have produced it for 3 years, I think, is a kind of a testament to the success of the Catalyst. And maybe they could think about doing a Catalyst 2. That's something I would like to see. Maybe they could come with like I said, the more plain Jane show side, and just do a whole new run with a thinner grind out here, and change up a few things, and do a Catalyst 2. And I think that would be a hot seller, because this was a pretty good seller in and of itself, despite its little shortcomings. And if they did a Catalyst 2 and did something different with that show side scale, and thinned out the blade stock a little bit, made it quite a bit lighter, brought it down more to that 4-ounce realm, I think they'd have a real freaking winner on their hands. And so Mr. Geoff, if you're out there watching this one day, think about it, man. A Catalyst 2 would be pretty awesome. Get it done, sir. And other than that, guys, I think that's about all I had to say about the Arcform Catalyst. It's a freaking awesome knife with a few minor shortcomings that are easily overlooked, and if you see one out there and you like the look of it, pick it up. All right, guys, I'm gonna get out of here. Have a great rest of your day. Later.